So welcome to our debate on question 1 on the Nevada ballot on the background checks initiative. For the initiative, we have Jennifer Crowe here, and against it, we have Ryan Hamilton. I'll let Jennifer Crowe make the case in a minute, Ryan Hamilton, but let me just ask you. Polling shows overwhelming support for this. You know that. Maybe you'll tell me you have different polling numbers. Background checks always seem very popular. The argument is even gun owners say some background checks are all right. The way they wrote this initiative, basically, is they took what happened in the legislature and they said they addressed some of the concerns Governor Sandoval has. No family-to-family transfers aren't going to be included. There's a temporary transfer provision. What's your beef?
Well, our beef is that those exceptions, and I'll say that the governor also still has a beef with it, those exceptions are complex, confusing, and too narrow. This is going to criminalize legal transactions that occur right now across the state, potentially thousands of times a day with no negative consequence.
Let's talk about that, because I think that's the biggest argument that you guys have put out. It will criminalize transactions that shouldn't be. Tell me some of what those are.
So one of the biggest examples to me and the biggest learning experiences to me came from an op-ed written by Senator James Settlemyer, who operates a ranch in northern Nevada. As a course of business, he owns weapons that he allows his employees to use as they work for him to do whatever they need to do on the ranch that requires the weapon, which I think usually involves taking care of pests, right? And so that's one of the things that's going to be against the law now, because those employees would have to get a background check to borrow the gun from James to take it out of his personal presence. And that's going to seriously complicate it. I mean, there are other examples which perhaps are less common, but the stakes are considerably higher. When a woman asks a friend for a gun because she feels that she's in danger from a stalker, a jilted lover, or a number of other things. I mean, something just as easy or simple as going target shooting. If I wanted to borrow your gun, I don't know if you have one, but if you did, and take it out to the range, well, we'd have to go get a background check for that, pay the fee, and when I wanted to return it to you, because the law is so poorly written, there's no exemption in for a return transfer, well, I'd have to get a background check on you to transfer the gun back.
Okay, so let's let you address some of this. There are these exceptions that are written in there. There's a whole section in the initiative, which, by the way, people can go to the Secretary of State's website and read the entire initiative so they can see what it says. What about, this is essentially what the NRA's opposition has been about, that you're criminalizing transactions and this is the favorite phrase, I hear it all the time, law-abiding citizens. Why would you do that?
Well, we're not doing that. Let's be clear. You're right. The language is available in the Secretary of State's office, and it's probably a good idea for people to read it to see how clear the exceptions are. It's Section 6 of the proposed law. And, you know, I disagree with Ryan. It provides clear exceptions for family-to-family transfers, for sharing guns when hunting or shooting, in cases of self-defense. Nothing in Question 1 is going to make criminals of law-abiding citizens. What Question 1 will do is it will make it harder for felons, domestic abusers, and other dangerous people to get guns. Right now, it is just far too easy for folks to get guns in some of these online sales and private sales at gun shows where background checks are not required.
It does address that in the initiative. There's no question about it. But what about what Ryan Hamilton brings up? James Settlemyer, a rancher, wants to give his employees guns. He's saying it would criminalize that and force each of them to go through background checks. Why is that necessary?
Well, it wouldn't do that, and there's other ways for senators.
When you say it wouldn't do it, it would do it based on the way it's written, right?
Well, no, because there's clear exceptions that for sharing guns, hunting, to really kind of address some of these issues, particularly in rural Nevada, where, you know, guns are very commonplace and most people own guns. And what we're hearing from supporters is that they don't see these problems with it, that sharing guns while hunting is not a problem, and that the exceptions in Question 1 address those issues. That's why we see such strong support from gun owners, from NRA members. And as you pointed out, poll after poll shows strong public support for Question 1 from across the spectrum of folks, from gun owners, NRA members, because they understand that it doesn't criminalize law-abiding citizens. It isn't an infringement on anybody's Second Amendment rights. It's really about improving public safety.
So there are three things that I have to say back to this. The first is, by the fact that Jennifer's disagreeing, it's an acknowledgement that there's confusion about the way this law is written. Even within the three of us on this stage, there's no agreement in the enforcement mechanism. The second thing is she uses her language very clearly. She says sharing while hunting, and that's true, but if I want to borrow your gun and then go out on myself, well, that's a background check. And one of the, and I guess this is the third point, one of the bizarre ironies of this is that it's going to make gun safety harder to teach through programs like the Boy Scouts, because they borrow their rifles that they take out to their summer camps to do these courses. So anytime a weapon leaves somebody's physical presence that they've loaned it, it requires a background check.
Okay, so let's talk about a couple of things that you said. And let's go back to the James Settlemyer example, by the way, as a rural state senator who's against the question. Why shouldn't those employees of his have to go through background checks? How do we know how thoroughly he has vetted those employees?
I mean, the idea that someone who is going to commit a crime, and this is the example that they like to use, that a person who's so dedicated to their crime that they're going to commit murder is going to hit a background check law and say, oh, that's it, that's the end of my crime spree, is just outrageous.
Well, I agree with that, but that doesn't answer the question I asked you, though.
So then I would say to you that there are relationships between individuals that we can trust. You could loan it to a cousin or a lifelong friend, and those would be safe transactions. And more to the point, for every example that you say, geez, well, if the law had been in place and this person wouldn't have been able to get guns, it erects barriers. I've had institutions or situations in my own family, where someone in the house where there have been guns, they wanted to get the guns out of the house. And just to bring it over to me would be a crime. They'd have to get a background check before they could say, listen, my young son or someone is having an episode, I just want to get the guns out to be super safe. Well, you have to get a background check to loan that to your lifelong friend. That's outrageous.
Here's the problem, Jennifer. I'll let you respond, but I want you to respond specifically to the notion that you did put a lot of exceptions in here, and you did that to try to gain support, to try to address some of the concerns that the governor had in his veto message a couple of sessions ago. But there's no way you can address every potential situation, and so the opposition will always be able to find, whether you agree with what the exception he's talking about now or not, instances where law-abiding citizens want to make a simple transfer or a sale that maybe shouldn't be in there. You can't write enough exceptions into there.
Well, but I think what Mr. Hamilton fails to acknowledge is that these exceptions address a lot of those issues, that they aren't convoluted or unclear. It's very clear what the exceptions do.
But the language is very clear, I agree. But the way that these kinds of things work is that you create, by creating exceptions, then you also create loopholes, right, when you have exceptions that people will try to exploit.
No, we're closing the loophole with question one. That's the whole point of what we're doing, is to close. The bottom line is that it's too easy for dangerous people to get guns in sales that don't require background checks. And right here in Nevada, we know that thousands of guns are changing hands this way every year. There's no reason for that. There's no reason to have this bifurcated system. We need to level the playing field and enforce our existing laws that we have and that we've had at licensed gun dealers for decades that have kept guns out of the hands of dangerous people. You know, Mr. Hamilton likes to talk about a lot of hypotheticals and what ifs, and you bring the point that you can always come up with a what if. But we have real life examples of cases of real people in Nevada whose lives could have been saved, or crimes that have
but that's policy by anecdote. That's policy by anecdote.
It's not by anecdote. These are real people. Does that discount somebody's life?
It's also counterfactual hypotheticals, right? You say if the background check had existed, this person's life would have been saved. That's a hypothetical. The second thing is the language isn't clear. The Attorney General called it a sloppy legal disaster. 16 of Nevada's...
The Attorney General is against question 2.
That's right.
The Attorney General is against it.
16 of Nevada's 17 sheriffs have largely come out and said that it's unenforceable. And of the 6 district attorneys who have been solicited for their opinion and have gone on the record, 5 are against it. The reality is the people who deal with this in their day-to-day life, which is crime enforcement and gun safety, believe that this will have no impact on crime in Nevada. That's why the undersheriff of Clark County went on the record saying that if passed, he did not believe that this measure would have, quote, a significant impact on crime in Clark County.
What did the sheriff of Clark County say?
Not a whole lot yet.
Yeah, exactly. He's neutral on this, from what I understand.
And for as many examples as Ryan can cite, we have thousands of rank and file police officers who are patrolling our streets. These are police officers who are keeping you and I safe every day. And what they tell us is that they believe it's not only enforceable, but it's a tool that they need to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people. They're seeing it every day in cases of domestic violence, gang shootings. Guns are too easily accessible to felons and other people who are prohibited under our existing laws from having them. You know, Ryan likes to make it sound like this is some sort of overarching reach. All question one does is enforce the laws that we already have on the books. This is not any new requirement. This is about making it...
That is not true.
Well,
if I transfer you a gun right now, I do not need a background check. If question 1 passes, it will require me, someone who has never violated the law, to get a background check to subject myself to additional government scrutiny as a law law
I'm selling
enforcement
you
mechanism.
a gun, I don't know that. And as a seller, I want to do the responsible thing.
Which you can do for free now.
No,
This
well,
requires no law. You
but
can do it
it's
for
not
free
a
now.
simple process,
But
Brian, and
it's-
you know that. That voluntary
That is
process
true.
is
That
not
is
easy.
true, but it's also a little bit too facile to say that all this initiative does is codify enforcement. You know that that's not true. You are trying to, as you mentioned earlier, close loopholes. I'm not saying whether the policy is right or wrong. I'm saying this does a lot more than say cops enforce the law. It does more than that.
Well, we know that there's a significant number of private sales that are taking place here in Nevada. We know that over 35,000 gun ads are put on just a handful of these websites every year. We also know that 1 in 11 people here in Nevada, not in other places, right here in Nevada, shopping for guns online is a felon or somebody else prohibited from having a gun. The easy access to guns, felons are shopping online, it's too easy for them to get guns that they can use to commit crimes. This isn't an inconvenience. This is about enforcing our existing laws, leveling the playing field, and making it harder for dangerous people to get guns.
If any of that were true, what Jennifer says,
All
she
of
would
it's
not
true.
she would not be looking to close this loophole. We know today, because the Department of Justice tells us that less than 1% of guns that are retrieved after being used in a crime come from this loophole. We know today, because the Department of Justice tells us, and because the University of Pittsburgh confirmed in August of 2016 that upwards of 80% of guns used in crimes are not acquired via the legal marketplace. So if we really wanted to plug this hole, if crime was our real motivating factor, we'd be going after the 80% and not less than 1.
Brian likes to cite this Department of Justice study, and what he fails to mention is that that study only looked at gun show sales. It did not take into account these online private sales. This is a huge segment of the market.
Okay, so let's talk about that. While your air quote game is strong and
Thank
putting
you.
the air quotes around the loopholes, wouldn't you acknowledge that too many guns in this country get into the hands of people who shouldn't have them? Whether they're law-abiding citizens at the time, they're mentally ill, they're potential criminals, they're domestic abusers or potential domestic abusers who should not have guns. Wouldn't you acknowledge that that's a serious loophole that needs to be addressed?
I will acknowledge the first part, but I do not acknowledge that question 1 does anything to address the problem whatsoever. And more to the point,
Not at all? You don't think it
not
does
at
it at
all.
all?
In
So
Washington,
are you saying that the current
yes.
background check system is ineffective?
No,
Because
I'm saying
essentially
that-
all question 1 does is expand that current system to private sales. Should we
I'm
throw
saying
the
that
whole
it's
thing out?
is the current background check ineffective at stopping criminals from getting firearms? Evidently it is, right? Because we know that 80% of guns used in crimes are not procured through the background check system.
Because they're going to these private sales online and at gun shows where background
that's
checks are not
so
required.
You misunderstand the statistic. They look at the stream of commerce through which a firearm transferred. And it was either stolen from somebody who legally got it, it was either bought from a straw purchaser or exchanged from somewhere, who knows where they got it. The fact is that 80% of the guns that are on the streets right now that are being used in crimes don't come from the background check procedure at all. They're being imported illegally, they're being stolen. They're not going through the realms of commerce that law can influence.
Let's talk about, one of the reasons people support background checks, and there's huge support across the country, is they see these mass shootings and they say, oh my God, we need to do something in this country, we need gun control. But in many, if not most of these mass shootings, the truth is that even if background check laws were in existence, they still would have gotten guns.
Well, sure, no one law can prevent every crime, and we're not claiming that question 1 can do that. And the shootings that you referenced, they're tragic. They impact people far outside the communities that they take place in. But what we have seen here in Nevada, we've seen it just this year, gun violence is up. It's far too easy for dangerous people to get guns, and people are dying because of it. If we can do something to make it harder for a criminal or a domestic abuser or somebody with a dangerous mental illness to get a gun that they are not allowed to have, that only makes sense. And that's why we see this strong support, not just from law enforcement, but from all, all different
It is popular,
groups.
but the devil is in the details of anything. But let's talk about the details. Would you acknowledge that if we were to sit here for hours and hash out all the exceptions you think should be in this, even if you could get Jennifer Crowe to agree to put that in there, you would still not support it?
You're right, and here's why.
Okay.
Because this is a law that targets the behavior of people who have not violated the law as an anti-criminal mechanism. It's as though we said everybody needs a governor on their car to punish those few people who were speeders. We think that the law should be used to stop people who are criminals from getting guns, which is why we think this is a bad initiative. Because if you're a criminal, you're obviously not going to get a background check before you buy your weapon.
This is about potentially dangerous
But
people.
the potentially dangerous
Like
person
mentally
won't be
ill
flagged by a background check because they haven't done anything to reflect on their record.
If they've been adjudicated as mentally ill, if they've been to a mental institution, that would come up. Listen, there's a big problem in this country with sharing of data. We all know that. But if it worked right, wouldn't that be a good thing?
If it worked right, and that's why the NRA, through John Cornyn, is putting money behind improving the national instant check system.
That's the Texas senator, in case people don't know. Go ahead, real quickly.
What's important to remember here is that laws like Question 1 are as much about prevention as they are about punishment. It'll set ordinary standards of behavior of what we all need to do to keep our community safe. We don't have jaywalking laws to punish people who cross the street outside of crosswalks. We have jaywalking laws to keep people from getting hit by cars. This is about making sure that if I'm selling, loaning, transferring, giving a gun to somebody, that I have the comfort and peace of mind of knowing that they're supposed to have it.
We're almost out of time, but I want to ask you basically, isn't the NRA's real opposition to this not so much the details that you're talking about, but the whole nose under the tent? In other words, that if you do this, then it's going to lead to this. And to some extent, some of that may be reasonable, but some of it is fear-mongering. Oh, my God, there's going to be a gun registry. Oh, my God, they're going to take our guns away. Isn't that what that's about?
So I don't believe that it's fear-mongering, and I'll tell you why. Because in states like Washington, where they said all you need to make you safe is Question 1. Well, guess what? The Question 1 advocates are back at the legislature. They're trying to ban particular types of gun, trying to get particular types of ammunition off of the market, saying, oh, no, what you needed to make you safe was Question 1 plus a whole load of other gun regulations. So right now, Jennifer Crowe is selling to the public this idea that if you vote yes on Question 1, upwards of 50% of gun crime is going to be reduced. That is outrageous.
But this is what this is about for you, isn't it? The nose under the tent? This is step 1.
No, it's about public safety.
I don't mean you personally.
And closing the loophole. I work for Nevadans for background checks. I'm working on the Question 1 campaign, and in a few weeks, I'm out of a job. So no, I don't
mean you
with
personally,
Ryan's.
but that is what advocates for this really want, right? This
Michael
is step
Bloomberg,
1.
the chief
okay,
funder,
let's
may hire
let's
someone
finish
else.
up with that. Let's finish up with that. He mentions Michael Bloomberg. I want people to know, this is the, and then this will be the final one. You are being supported mostly by a group essentially founded and funded by Michael Bloomberg, the former governor of New York, well known for gun control. He has put millions upon millions of dollars into this state through this group, Every Town, to get this done. How should Nevadans judge that part of this?
Well, I think what Nevadans need to also look at in terms of our finance report is the more than 1,300 of their fellow Nevadans who have
you're not going to try
supported
that
the
one.
campaign.
Come on.
Well, it's
Bloomberg
like,
has put millions of dollars into this. The rest of that money is insignificant compared to that.
Are those 1,300 people who live here insignificant
Don't
who support the campaign?
I don't want to debate you about.
Come on, John,
but those 1,300 people put in this much, and Bloomberg put in almost everything, right?
We have significant support from in the state. Clearly, what's happening in Nevada
He made a $6 million contribution.
Clearly, what's happening in Nevada is gaining attention from people across the country. You say it all the time. Nevada matters. Clearly, that's the case here. But I don't think
back at me.
Well, I don't think that negates the support that we have.
I'm just asking what Nevadans should think about it.
They should think that their neighbors support it because that's what's
happening.
happening.
Let me ask you finally, Ryan, the NRA. Again, a special interest is funding your side of this campaign. Sure. The NRA has notoriously said no to any kind of gun control measures, including this, even though there are many NRA members, this is a fact, who support background checks. What should Nevadans make of that?
Most people support background checks. I, like most regular Nevadans, support background checks when people want to purchase a firearm. What our problem is that you can't loan a weapon for a course of hours to a lifelong friend or family member without having to subject yourself to additional government searches, right? Essentially background checks. And I'll say this. Nevadans should look at what else Michael Bloomberg is going to come after with his fortune, because just one state over in California is trying to ban sugary drinks.
Oh, here we go with the big gulp. Okay, we're not going to get
It's important to note, though, that the opposition has one funder, and that's the NRA.
Okay. All right. Well, you essentially have one funder, too.
We have more than 3,000 donors,
thousands of members in the state.
The hundreds of Nevadans who have contributed. Ryan Hamilton and Jennifer Crowe, I really appreciate your willingness to come out and talk about this very important issue. Question 1 on the ballot. Go on the Secretary of State's office website, read it for yourself. Thanks again to both of you for being here.
Thanks for having me, John.